Hello, everyone. It's your friend Tony Ortiz back once again with Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. And what I have for you is what I hope will be modular, interchangeable, skippable, aroundable tutorial system for you to pick up this game, get used to the randomizer functions inside the game, learn the game, and then be able to play the game to a level where you can even enter a tournament, for fun and leisure. So basically, I wanted to make this remake this series that I've already made, just because it's my other series is a bunch of big long videos. So this is going to be set to skip around, so you can just use the modules that you think you need, or you can follow them all in order. It's up to you. So in this first video, all I'm going to do is talk about the game, the settings, and a lot of the background, and then from there. We'll go ahead and move on throughout the line. So if you want to take a look at this long playlist and pick which videos that you think are suited to you and which you think you need, and feel free to ignore the ones that you don't. My ultimate end goal again is to get you not only comfortable with the game but able to play the game in a competitive setting. So racing against other people or just for your own practice and fun. So we will be talking a lot about speed runs of the randomizer. But if you don't have any interest in that, almost everything I'm going to talk about is very applicable to just playing through the game casually. So a lot of the things I may talk about in future videos on this playlist will cover speed tech. You can just feel free to ignore those things and skip forward if you just want to get like the whole data download and best practices, things like that. Learn where things are in the video game, the castle, wherever, and some techniques, some routing decisions. Maybe just learn all the locations. All those things are going to be available for you, and we're going to try to cover every single thing we possibly can, but not overload you with information. So you can go ahead and break this up, as I mentioned, skip videos, watch them all in your own time, not have to worry about remembering where you were or getting the same information over and over again. Okay, so that's the objective. So first, I just want to talk about the background of the game. So assuming that you know nothing about this style of game whatsoever, let me just talk about that a little bit first. So Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is a Metroidvania, and let's talk about what that means. So Super Metroid, Castlevania are the two games that reference in that category, and basically the games are games that have RPG elements behind the scenes. There's numbers happening based on what's going on. You're doing an action platforming style. And there's a lot of scenarios in many of these games, in the Metroids and the Castlevanias, where you go to a section of the game, you maybe leave, and you come back and backtrack and find something new. You find items that open up new areas, or you find movement techniques that open up new areas, and you defeat your bosses, and eventually you get to the end boss of the game, you defeat that boss, you win. So that's the basic breakdown of what the genre is. Um, as these games progressed and evolved, a lot of the numbers went from behind the scenes being calculated on the back end of the video game to coming up front and showing you what they are and letting you kind of theory craft your way around these numbers. So in a lot of future Castlevania games, you'll see damage in numbers on the screen. You'll see it in this game, and so on. You'll see stats like strength and the dexterity, things that are very, very close to RPGs. So you kind of get like an RPG element added on to your action platformer. You get like kind of the best of all the worlds. So that's what a Metroidvania is. Now, Bloodstained itself is part of the Igavania series, and we call it that because the main developer, creative direction, comes from Igarashi, who worked for Konami previously and now has his own company. This is the first game that new company published back in 2019. They completely crowdfunded this game, and this is the spiritual successor to Castlevania Symphony of the Night. So if you're familiar with that game, this is kind of like the spiritual successor precisely to that game. Very similar in many ways, but it also has many elements from the games that came in after that game that Igarashi also made. So there's all sorts of interesting systems that come from the games he made later that have kind of been pulled and put back into this game, in addition to like the basic Soten style of gameplay. So that's what this game is. If you buy it right now, you can buy it on any platform. The randomizer mode is built into the game. So if you want to go back out to the menu here, which I will do, you can see randomizer mode is right here and available for you to select as soon as you purchase. You do not have to complete a playthrough or do anything like that. You can just select it. You will get a little warning message that if you have not completed a regular playthrough, that it will advise you to complete a regular playthrough first. And here I'll just touch on that is a very good idea. If you have somewhere between 10 to 20 hours to play the game through normally, casually, I would recommend you do that. The story is pretty interesting. It's not as fleshed out as, say, an RPG would have or a big budget action game would have. but it has the basics and introduces you to all the characters, gets you familiar with some of the motivations and some of the other stuff, and it will make more sense to you when you are going through the game as to like why you're fighting who, where and all that. The game basic playthrough is pretty linear. You do some backtracking, but it kind of just weaves you in and out throughout the areas. You get something that unlocks the next location, you go there. You're kind of like, you'll realize, oh, I can't go there, I can't do this, I can't go there, I can't do that. So I can only go this one path. You'll go there, you'll unlock the thing that you need, and then you'll go from there. Just a quick um, a note on that too. The game does amp up in difficulty pretty severely. So since this is an RPG elements rolled into the game, you do have a level. When you defeat enemies, you gain XP and you gain levels as well. So you can kind of think of it as an RPG. If you're having trouble beating a boss, you may want to like backtrack into the area that you're in, defeat a bunch of enemies, level up a few times, maybe find some better items, maybe get some more money to buy some more healing items from the shop, and then go on and challenge the boss that you were stuck on. So that's all I'm going to touch on when it comes to the basic game. After that, we just want to talk about some of the things that you can do. So once you acquire the game virtually on any platform, I would highly recommend not buying the mobile version, as that version is not a completely up-to-date version. It is running a version that is several versions behind. Also, it's going to be very difficult to play. Um, or I would also not recommend at this current time, as of the summer of 2025, to buy the PS5 version. Unfortunately, the way the PS5 version was ported from the PS4 version, there's a lot of extra delay and lag that exists, and especially if you play on a regular television, if you don't have a specific gaming monitor to hook up to your PS5, it's going to be much, much worse, and it's already almost unplayable. You're talking about anywhere from 15 to 60 frames of delay. And if you're unfamiliar with that terminology, 15 frames is 1/4 of a second. 60 frames is a whole second, basically. In terms of like what our human eyes can see and what video games are programmed to recognize. Okay, so that's pretty tough. But every other platform, PC, Xbox consoles, including the Series S, PS4, are good to go. Nintendo Switch 1 is capped at 30 FPS just due to the hardware limitations. Nintendo Switch 2, we are assuming that it will probably run a little bit better, but we don't have anybody in the community that has tested it as of this recording, so I can't testify to how good it will be on that platform. But I would assume with the hardware upgrade from the Switch 2, you will have at least a 60 FPS experience. As this game is Unreal Engine 4 and it was released in 2019, it's not really asking too much of most hardware. You will see some interesting issues though with certain graphics cards that are older, video drivers that are out of date, and all sorts of stuff like that. So there are still some weird instances where you could have some graphical issues. You may want to check your hardware if that's the case. I've experienced this firsthand, and it is a little random. It kind of depends on like what system you're working with and what version of operating system you're using and so on. So, but for the most part, you can pretty much count on the game being very stable, as it's been out for a long time, and it's been adapted for almost every platform. If you do want to play the game on a mobile, like moving platform, and like buying it on Android or iOS is not something you want to do, as I just mentioned, you probably shouldn't. I'd say the very best alternative you could have would be the Steam Deck, of course, because that runs SteamOS, which is very resource light, and this game is available on Steam, and it often goes on sale along with all of its DLC. If you can't do a Steam Deck, any other kind of handheld, gaming console should work pretty well, and you can usually get the game from anywhere else you may have it. Like if you have it on Xbox, you can usually xCloud. You can do all sorts of stuff to play that game. At least download a local copy to whatever handheld you have, and I would play it that way. But the controls are pretty much standard for modern games, so it's going to assume you have a controller that looks a lot like an Xbox controller. And I'm going to turn this light on for you right now so you can kind of see my controller here that I'm using. So it's going to assume you have your face buttons, of course, your two sticks, your start select, your directional buttons over here, and then your shoulder buttons, up here. So it's going to assume you have basically what would be the equivalent of a PlayStation 1 controller or newer. So, if you are playing on a mobile device, you will probably want to make sure you have enough buttons just to make sure that you can actually access all the commands. So pretty standard, but I just figured I'd point that out because if you're thinking, hey, it's available on mobile, maybe it only uses 4 or 5 buttons. It definitely doesn't. It uses, we use pretty much, let's see, every button in here Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I think you can get by with 9 or 8 even, but definitely that's the minimum. Um, And then, speaking of controllers, while we're on the subject, before we move any further, there are more ways to play than just using a controller. You can use a keyboard. This game has keyboard support if you are playing on a console that has keyboard support or a PC. You can also use leverless controllers. Some of the best runners use leverless controllers. That will make certain things easier, like certain inputs and all that. But I do want to give another disclaimer here. This game, thankfully, does not require any actual complicated directional inputs. So if you've played a fighting game before and you struggle with things like doing quarter circles or half circles or whatever like that, whether it's on a D-pad, a joystick, or using some kind of combination of buttons, though none of that is required to play the game and like get through a playthrough. There are certain items that absolutely will let you do things a lot easier if you're able to do those motions. But the only real motion that comes up that's really beneficial is the quarter circle forward motion. So down to down forward to forward, and then pressing a button. If you can do that motion in both directions, you pretty much have access to all of the major time saving and speedy stuff that you would have access to that will make your life easier. So it's very, very low execution in terms of like how complicated the execution is. The execution to do all the best stuff in the game is absolutely very precise. So the depth is there. It's just in a different place than you may have been familiar with, especially if you're comparing it to a game like Soten, where the inputs are pretty easy and forgiving, but there's a lot of them, and you have to chain a lot of them together. And sometimes people with hand issues or stuff like that have struggle with those kind of things. So this game is a little bit more accessible on that front than its peers, or like the game that it's a spiritual successor to. Okay, so let's talk about now what's going to happen when you get in the game. Before we even get into the randomizer bit, I just want to take you to the options menu and explain what some of this is, because this is very important stuff that like nobody will tell you. There's no manual, of course, within modern games. I would always come to the configuration menu first. Here, of course, is your controls. You might not know what any of this is. I'm not going to go through all of it in detail, but basically everything here is pretty much similar. You won't know what conjure shard, directional shard, and manipulative shards are when you first sit down. But just think of conjure is a big magic spell. All I have to do is push the button. Directional shard is another magic spell or a per second magic spell that I may have to aim or I may not. And then the manipulative shard is a lot like the conjure shard. It's almost the exact same thing, except instead of casting a big spell, it does some kind of like game altering function. It might make you super fast or stop time or create a shadow clone or heal yourself, something like that. And then, viewing maps, shortcuts, all this is pretty standard. Directional input, confirm, and so on. You're going to have your volume sliders. You're going to have all your graphic settings. You're going to have other. So other's just going to have like certain things. If you're doing speed running, you're going to want to turn off things like animations, hints. Vibration is for you and your preferences. Switching what the X and circle / A and B buttons do for confirming or canceling stuff. And all these other things. But I want to talk about the graphics menu specifically here, just so that you are aware of what's going on in the game. So, depending on your hardware, you're going to have all these settings somewhere. You can always turn everything to low. The game still looks fine. It may run better. But I just wanted to talk about these two options very, very quickly. VSync and frame rate smoothing. So these things are kind of what they use to make lesser hardware be able to run the game a little bit better. And this caps the frame rate at 60 FPS if you have both of these things on, just to make sure that everything is running the way it's supposed to. So now if you're on a console, it's probably wise to leave these on. Although if you're on an Xbox Series X, you may want to turn these off because you might actually get better performance. That console is strong enough. I would also say the same for PS5, except for, again, I mentioned before, PS5 has other issues with the way it was ported that unfortunately these things don't really affect. It's still bad with them on or off. But if you're on PC, I would definitely recommend turning these off, especially if you have decent graphics card and a decent processor, because this will uncap your frame rate and allow the game to just dump 600 frames a second at you if your hardware can handle it, which most hardware, if you have a semi-modern gaming PC at all, will be able to handle. But your mileage may vary, so I would say definitely turn these things off, try the game out, do some of the techniques, put a bunch of stuff on the screen, see how your device responds, to these settings being changed. But this is important because when we talk about the speedrunning aspect of the game and a lot of the tricks that we're going to learn how to do, These being off will give you a longer window to get things input correctly. So the game, like many games that have come before it, has a lot of things that are tied to frame rate. And one of the things that's tied to frame rate is how long you have to make inputs before the window closes and you can't do the thing you want to do anymore, and you have to wait through some kind of recovery animation or something like that. We'll talk a little bit more about the animations in another video. We just want to get this one, all the basic stuff out of the way here. So after that, you're ready to play the game. You've played through the game once normally, or maybe you're just like, I don't need to play through the game normally. I love randomizers. I love Metroidvanias. I know exactly what's going on. Just tell me about the randomizer. Let's talk about that. That will wrap us up here. So hit extra mode, hit randomizer mode. You'll select the save file. You notice my normal game up here is at the top. This is grayed out. And it's going to remind you which files are randomizer files because the game has a lot of other modes as well. But whichever files you have that are randomizer files, when you select randomizer, they will have their title here available and not grayed out. If I put like a boss rush mode seed here, this would be grayed out or something. And this will let you select and continue if you've already saved one. So we want to create a new game. So we're going to go ahead and go to data. You can name the file whatever you want and proceed. Now you're going to select the difficulty. So normal difficulty is what we're going to talk about. I will not talk about hard or nightmare difficulty from this point on, but basically they do exactly what they say. Hard makes everything hit you harder, makes everything take less damage. It changes some bosses. They gain new attacks, all sorts of stuff. Nightmare, another step up on that ladder. None of the competitive stuff that we've ever done is ever played on anything but normal. So again, I'm not going to mention that after right now. So I'm just going to pick normal. Now, you may be familiar with this if you've played randomizers before, but the game is going to generate a seed for you, and then it's going to use that seed to algorithmically put things where it needs to, move things around, and so on. So if you want to use an existing seed where the settings are already set, somebody will give you a string of numbers. You'll come here, you'll select use existing seed, you'll type in or paste in the numbers that they gave you. That will automatically load up the exact same shuffling and all the rule set that you decided on that the person made with that seed. Okay, so pretty easy there. And then customize will take you into the menu where you select all of the options that we have. These are all of our options. Not that many, but with wild effects on the game. Okay, so first one is the goal. What do you want to have to do to be able to declare victory? So defeat Jeeble. Jeeble is like the mid-boss of the game that opens the final area of the game where the actual real boss is at. And to defeat him, you actually get the bad ending if you play through the normal game. Okay, so it's a lot like Symphony of the Night in that way. If you beat Richter, you get this bad ending. You have a different set of conditions during the fight to meet, where if you meet those conditions, you continue to play. He opens up the final area. You can go and beat the final boss, which is defeat True Evil, which is, again, pretty self-explanatory. All you have to do is beat the final boss. Now, we almost always play on defeat all evil, which is going to be go to Jeeble's fight, do the alternate win condition, which is what you're supposed to do in the base game, and then go and beat the final boss. So doing both of these things, you must do both. I've never seen us play without this, so this is a pretty easy one. But if you want to experiment with a much faster run, you can go try defeat Jeeble. If you want to have just like a speed run to the end, or there's a specific part you want to practice, you can do this as well. I'm not saying you have to do any of the options that I'm describing, but this one's pretty much set in stone. Okay, key items. We have two options: shuffled and anywhere. Now, this flag or option kind of functions a little bit different than a lot of the other ones, all of the other ones really. It actually is also going to be looking at how you have enemy drops and items selected as well, because the key items in the game are not just items that drop on the ground. They are also progression shards, and shards are something that you equip. They're magical abilities. They're what those three buttons that we were talking about before, the conjure shard, manipulative shard. There's abilities you acquire in the game that actually open up new areas. They're not items that drop on the ground or that you open up in a treasure chest or that you buy from the shop and so on. So unfortunately, since those things are technically key items, if you just shuffle them around, you don't always get a predictable experience. You may defeat an enemy that normally drops a progression shard. It will drop a different progression shard, but of a different class. And I know you might not know what that means yet, but trust me, that's not what you want. So anywhere shuffles them to anywhere in the game. Now this sounds absurd because, well, okay, then that means that this can be over there and this can be over there. No, technically not. So the game is limited in the ability to move items and shards in between each other. That actually can't happen. So shards always drop off an enemy with a percentage chance. Sometimes it's 100, sometimes it's as low as 3%. And items are always dropped off of an enemy in a separate manner or found in a treasure chest or bought in a shop or whatever. And the game does not have the ability to cross those two things with each other. So even if you put anywhere, all this means is that any shard can go where any shard can go, and any item can go where any item can go. And there are even some limitations on what items can go where, just because the built-in randomizer does not have the ability to move these things across. So really, this flag seems like it controls a lot, but you're almost always going to want to set this to anywhere, because really what's going to determine what actually is moved around and randomized for you are the two ones in the middle that we're going to talk about in just a minute. So really, I could go super more in depth on this one, but I don't want, again, information overload you. Just put this on anywhere and let these other two options do the work for you. And this will definitely help you with, and help us help you if you get stuck. If this is unshuffled, it's going to be very hard for us to help you. Like, oh, you'll go check here, go check there, go check here, go check there. This is very volatile and unpredictable. Funny enough, it seems like it would be the more tame, but just the way it shuffles out at the end, you're just going to want to have this on anywhere. Save in warp rooms. Okay, so just like Symphony of the Night, there are and many other Castlevania games, there are warp rooms that will warp you from one warp room to the other side of the castle to another warp room. You just have to find those rooms first, and they kind of become like, a network of warps that you can travel through. If you could do unchanged, that means that all the way the warp rooms and the save rooms are going to stay where they're at in the normal game. Mixed will shuffle them at random with some exceptions. So thankfully, even though this game does not have true logic to prevent soft locks in it, um, which I don't even want to bother talking about, that's just the way the built-in randomizer is. That's the limitations that they have. Let's just focus on this. And that is, mixed will have some exceptions to the mixed, and the reason is because they want to make sure that you are avoiding some soft locks. Whatever they can help you avoid, they will help you avoid. So the initial save room in the town area is going to stay where it's at. The initial warp room in the town area is going to stay where it's at, and there are 2 more additional warp rooms that will always be warp rooms, because in the even vanilla playthrough of the game, you theoretically could get to these 2 areas without the means to get out of those 2 areas. So by making sure those 2 areas have a warp room, you always have a way out, as long as you've collected any other warp room that's not in those areas. So there is some exceptions to the mixed rule, and you will learn how to exploit those for decision making and routing choices if you stick with me through the rest of the tutorial. But you could pick either one here. This is a personal preference thing, and I will go through our normal set of choices after we explain each one. Okay, so back up here to items. So this is specifically talking about not only items, but also like the way that they're obtained. So like the method that you obtain them. So retain method and retain type. And total random. Method is very hard to understand. I'm not even really going to bother touching on it. You're almost never going to pick this. Retain type is what I was already talking about. So the shards will always retain their type no matter what, in terms of shards and what enemies. Now, there are different categories of shards. So what retain type will do to shards is it will make those categories stay within their own category. So they're all designated by color in the game. So there's red shards, there's blue shards. The red are the conjure, the blue are the manipulative, the purple are the directionals, and so on. There's a few more colors. So what retain type is going to do is it's going to make sure that if you have an enemy that would normally drop a purple, and you keep retain type on, it's only going to shuffle the purples amongst the other enemies that drop purples, and so on down the line. Same thing with items. If a chest normally would have a weapon in it, it's only going to shuffle itself with the other weapons that are also in chests. And it does not shuffle crafting items into chests, because that's, again, one of those limitations that the game has. Method changes this a bit, because if I can obtain a movement shard that would unlock a new area, or an item that would also unlock a new area, it's going to theoretically try to mix those locations up. But remember, it can't mix where a shard drops off an enemy the way a shard drops and where items are. So again, it's just a they didn't quite think this one through all the way to how it was going to work with everything else in the game. So I would stay away from this one. Total random basically does what I just said, but it disregards those category restrictions. So, if a white shard drops off of this little lamp, breakable lamp, it's going to say, oh, instead of another white shard being in here, it could be any color of any shard anywhere, and that's what's going to be in here now. Same thing with items. The way that it shuffles those items again, though, is restricted to items that you would normally find out in the world. So anything that's hidden in a breakable wall, anything that's on a treasure chest, anything that a boss would give you that's an item, that is only going to be shuffled in the overworld itself. The shops and crafting and all that stuff, they have their own pools, and they will be shuffled or unshuffled depending on these flags over here to the right. Okay. And enemy drops basically works the exact same thing, exact same way. So item drops are randomized, but shards remain. Mixed shards, but items remain unchanged, normal. But you want to randomize everything, right? We almost always pick chaos because chaos actually does the shuffling. So if you don't pick one of these two things, it kind of like overwrites your. Yeah, again, this is a little bit redundant, but this is how you're going to be able to know what to do when you fire this up on your own. And I would almost always go with chaos because that's like where the fun is. One special little note here: when enemies drop non-key items, so like a regular like crafting material or maybe a weapon or something like that, they're not truly shuffled with everything. So it takes an enemy's pool of drops. So like say this enemy drops these 3 different items at these 3 specific percentages, and it takes that little grouping set and it moves that around with another enemy and like moves other groups around. So that group stays intact, and you can use this to your advantage. If there's a specific item you're looking for and you notice that an item drops from an enemy that is in that pool, you can discern that, okay, this enemy may also drop what I need, so I'm going to farm it, for a few minutes to try to get that drop. We do this a lot in the harder seeds where we are doing a little bit more crafting and breaking down of items than we would be doing in the normal set that we play. Okay, and then crafting, shops, and quests, very, very self-explanatory here. The way to complete a quest will never change, but the results can. That's what Shuffled will do. What's available in the shop will always be the same in terms of each specific type of item will have a randomized amount of stuff in there, but it will stay within its own category. So, like, when you go to the shop normally in the game, it's going to have several potions, it's going to have several food items, and it's going to have a couple of like other non-potion but usable items like the mythohydrate that will cure poison or whatever. So when you retain the type, it will shuffle these items, but it will keep potion shuffle with potions and so on, whatever classifies itself as a potion, and it will keep food shuffling with food. And oftentimes there's not much food available in the base game because the game expects you to find ingredients and make your food. But when you go to full random, then those again safety rails come off. So instead of having X amount of weapons in there, X amount of armor, whatever, it just picks an arbitrary amount, shuffles that around, and then you can get anything in those spots. So all the items in the very first menu where the potions and the food and stuff would be, well, it's not only going to shuffle potions with potions and whatever. You can get 17 different types of food, 1 potion, and maybe 1 extra usable item. Or you could get 3 or 4 different types of potions, some like 10 foods, and so on, right? So that's kind of like how the shops work. Crafting is an interesting one as well. So again, if you shuffle crafting but you retain type, that means that all the ingredients to make an item are going to stay the same, but the results will be shuffled. And if retain type, they will be shuffled to something else of the exact same category again. So if there's a piece of armor, it will be shuffled to another piece of armor, and so on. And the ingredients will stay the same. If you go total random on this, that will shuffle not only the ingredients, but also the results, and also what it breaks into. So if something breaks down into something else, it will break down into those random things. You put those same 2 random things together, you will get the thing that you just broke. But that's about the only thing that stays intact. Everything else will be different. So you can have something that makes a sword that's really bad, but it takes like 10 of this crafting material that's really rare, and like 3 of this weapon that's really rare, and so on. Like if you find one of those things and then break it, you will get those ingredients back. So that adds a whole nother layer of randomization on to the playthrough. So let me just talk about the two main categories that we play, and what these two categories refer to are how we set up these categories. And then anything else that you want to do for fun, like I've been experimenting with killing all the bosses, even though you wouldn't have to normally, and then like trying to do that as fast as possible, or any kind of other gimmick that you may want to add. That you can add after the fact. I just want to talk about these two categories first so that these give you a base of where to start. I want to talk about the more difficult one first because it's really easy to remember. Okay, it's called Max Chaos. That means we randomize everything we possibly can in the game, but make sure that we give ourselves a good chance for it to be completable, for mistakes to be reproducible, and for soft locks to be picked to make sure that people didn't miss anything. And to do that, all you have to do is take every single category like I have you shown here and have all of it, every setting on the bottom. That's all you have to do. It's that simple. Every single category, put the setting on the bottom. That's your maximum chaos seed. Okay, a little bit more difficult. Range of time that it takes to complete this for even some of the best of us can be as low as 45 minutes, but it can be all the way up in excess of 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on how bad the stuff is and where it's distributed and like how many places we check and how many times we guess wrong and where to go next and so on. But the main method of play, the one that we usually play in tournaments, the one that we usually play competitively, the one that's guaranteed to be a little bit shorter because there's only so many places to go, is going to be using that retain type flag up here that I mentioned. And all you have to do to change the settings to get to our what's called same type shuffle, or STS for short, is change this flag here to retain type, and then go down to your save and work rooms and just leave that as unchanged. Everything else stays at the bottom and you're done. That's it. Those are the main two categories that we play. And I would strongly recommend that if you are new to the game, after you've done your playthrough or after you're confident, you've learned a little bit about the game, where to go, the layout, all that, that you try this set of flags right here. This one's going to be the most fun, especially while you're learning, because you're never going to get super punished for guessing wrong, or at least the only way you'll get punished is if it takes forever for an enemy to drop the shard you're looking for, which can happen to anyone, even the best players. So this one's really going to help you kind of get comfortable. And then when you get comfortable and you want to learn where every single breakable wall in the castle is, where all the hidden items are and everything, all the hidden like locations are for to stash items, then you maybe will change it. You'll kick it to a full max chaos run. And I have many runs on my channel of both, so you can check those out and kind of get an examples, and so on. What I will try to do for the tutorial series at the very end is I'll have a sample of each one of these two seeds. I'll run through the game and I'll kind of talk through and explain what I'm doing, my thought process, and so on. And I'll try to do it from the educational perspective. So, like, assuming you don't know much about the game, and then just trying to again explain to you why I'm doing what I'm doing, and try to give you a good example to learn from. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is for this video. In addition, I have some other supplementary content to this. So if you want to check through my other Bloodstained playlists, I have a playlist of my submission to a randomizer marathon that I played in, my practice journey up to that marathon, and a review of one of the runs I did in that marathon, so you can check those things out. I have races on my channel as well, and if you want to check out a tournament that was played a couple years ago, you can definitely just type in Bloodstained Ritual randomizer and then just do 2023 or tournament or whatever. You should see a playlist of videos on the Jupiter Climbs channel, and that is basically the last tournament we had. All the matches are there if you want to check those out. I'm commentating on some of them, so you may hear my voice in some of those videos if you check any of those out. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you join me throughout the rest of the series. This one was a little longer because we had a lot more background information to get through, but the rest of them are going to be a little bit shorter, a little bit more focused on each area of the game and things you need to know, and tricks and tips and all that kind of stuff. All right, so hopefully we'll see you in the next bit of the series, and all my links are down below. So if you want to check out my live streams, if you want to check out the rest of my channel, it's in the description. Thank you for checking out Bloodstained, and if you're watching this a little bit later in 2025, you definitely want to check out that very last video in the series, because in there we're going to have a special announcement for you guys to check out and hopefully be very excited about. So keep in mind, you may want to skip to that one and watch it in this playlist, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next ones.